Yesterday I promised I'm gonna do a tier list of the legends and the pre-Rift events, and I'm doing it here right now. Before you see the tier list, please leave a comment with the 2 legends that you would like to play in the event, and then we'll compare it with my tier list at the end. So remember that if you play the 6 booster pack, a normal sealed event, then you're not gonna have any guaranteed legends because you have to open them and they are rare in the booster pack. But if you play the event where there's 5 booster packs plus the pre-kit, then you will have guaranteed one of the 6 legends, and those are the 6 that you can have in the pre-Rift packs. If you want to learn the cards that are in those 15 booster packs of those legends, we have it in the video that we released yesterday. Otherwise, you're gonna have to open them in the booster pack. We're gonna start with the Draven. Like, unfortunately, as he is in constructed, he is also as strong in sealed. I would even argue that he's probably even better in sealed, because in sealed you're gonna have more battles. You're actually gonna be playing with less spells, you're going to be playing more battles on the battlefield, and because of that, Draven has even more value than he has in constructed. Now on the other side of the spectrum, you're going to get Renata. Now I think Renata, there's no way I want to play this legend. It doesn't matter how good my deck is, I don't think there's a singular reason to play the Renata instead of just having +1 draw, right? Remember, if you don't play a legend or a chosen champion, then you will have +1 draw, but +1 draw is maximum. You don't get +2 draws if you don't have a champion unit and a legend, so just remember that. But I would just always value a card draw instead of Renata when it comes to just how much this legend can bring to a sealed event. Next one is gonna be a little bit specific because we're gonna talk about Azir, and Azir has 2 options. Either you have a deck that has like 8 or more equipment and he suddenly becomes like A tier, in my opinion, because he has a lot of value. You're gonna get a lot of value out of the equipment as well. Or you don't have any equipment, but if you have to play Azir, then he's an F, and there's like no reason to play him, right? So just take that into consideration, but I'm putting him in an A because I just assume that you can build a deck around him. Remember that in sealed we're gonna have 3 domains, so you're gonna have a wider array of possible equipment that you would normally not be able to play in Azir. For example, Boots of Swiftness. If you have an option to play in Azir, it's one of the best equipments that you can actually attach there, right? Like, you have a lot of options. Like, you can you remember that those signature spells, though, they require you to have a complete alignment, so you cannot just use signature gear that has like red and purple, like the spinning axe, because there's no way of putting both of those colors while you play Azir, right? You can play like Azir, which is gonna be green, yellow, and for example red or purple, but not both, right? But you can use the singular color equipment in your 3rd domain, which brings a more viability to Azir in this format in general. But again, it really depends on the pool that you open. But I think Azir might be a strong choice because it delivers a lot of potential value, which you would not have otherwise in decks that want to play a lot of equipment. Next one is gonna be Rumble. Now Rumble, again, a very specific legend. Either he's gonna be unplayable because you don't have a lot of mechs, right? Or he's gonna be very playable, and actually the shield will matter a lot. So if you by some chance open an insane pool with the amount of mechs that you're gonna have, he is gonna be an A tier. But if you don't, it's gonna be an F tier, right? So take that into consideration. Well, basically this is a tier of like, I'm either super playable or unplayable, right? Unfortunately though, the mechs are only available in red and blue, so you're not gonna benefit from the 3rd color, because in the 3rd color you're not gonna find any mechs, at least in Spiritforged. But now that I think of it, it's so hard to actually build a mech deck in this format because you only have 3 mechs that are commons, and those are 2 drops and 1 3 drop, and they are like okay-ish, but they are not fantastic. And then that's still not enough. You actually need to get more units to be playable, right? You want to have a better impact with like higher drops, so you would need like at least 1 Breakneck mech. You would need then maybe Production Surge or 2, but those are all uncommons, so it's gonna be very hard to get a playable deck because everything else is a rare, right? Although all the rares here are great, they are problematic because you're gonna have a very small chance of actually getting that into a Rumble deck. So overall, because of that, I'm gonna move him actually to B, because it's gonna be just so much harder to build a playable deck than, for example, Azir, that is gonna be able to mix the equipment from 3 colors instead of Rumble, who is still limited to 2 colors. Next, I'm gonna talk about Rexi, and I think Rexi belongs in the S tier as well, even though she doesn't get you like cards on defense when you're playing combat, right? If you're gonna win, she's still incredibly powerful because she can deliver you card draw while conquering. And it is a little bit RNG, right? Because you will have to make a decision from the top of your deck, which is not always good. But overall, any potential card draw in a sealed format in almost every game is incredibly valuable. So Void Brewer, because of that, by default is an incredible legend that you want to play in a sealed event. Next I'm gonna be talking about is gonna be Fiora. I'm putting Fiora in C, and maybe I'm very wrong about it, but in my head, when I'm trying to like set up a deck for Fiora, is that I feel like I still want to be on the upper end of the curve, right? But then if I want to be on the upper end of the curve while still benefiting from Fiora, I would have to play equipment. But if I don't get the equipment, then I don't benefit from Fiora almost at all, because how else will I gonna make units mighty? So would I play Fiora if I only, for example, had like 2 pieces of equipment and maybe 1 spell that buffs? That's potentially 3 ramp ups. Like if I use each of them once, I know that you can use equipment few times, but how important is this for my end game? So you have to think when you're creating a deck for Fiora, I think you have to very actively think, how big is my end game? If you have like multiple units that cost you like 6 or more, but you still have equipment that you want to use, or you have a buff that doesn't cost you power, right, but it will allow you to create mighty and ramp up faster to your end game, then you might consider Fiora. But it actually is a very interesting challenge in deck building, and because of that she's interesting, but I don't think she's gonna be you know, because of that, super powerful. But it is a puzzle to solve, and it's gonna be nice if it works, but otherwise it's probably not gonna be that efficient in a deck that isn't like super well built. Now let's take Ezreal, and I think Ezreal is a straight up F. It's gonna be so hard to get value out of this. Think about it this way: if you don't play Ezreal, then you already drew 1 card. And drawing 1 card is activating his legend ability once. So you not only increase your odds of having like a 2-drop for your opening hand, because you start with 1 more card, right? Because you don't play with a legend, which is very beneficial, by the way, right? You would have to activate it minimum 2 times to even have a slightly better option. So I would only consider Prodigal Explorer if I had a reliable way of drawing like 3 cards per game. To draw 3 cards per game, I would need a lot of spells, like so many of them. I mean, there can also be units that choose something, like for example the dog for 3 mana, for 3 energy, that allows you to do -2 if you use blue to a unit, right? But then again, you have to combine it, your opponent has to have units as well. So I feel like in majority of the cases, you never want to play Prodigal Explorer, and you'd rather just have a 5-card opening hand rather than him. But at the same time, if your deck for some reason has like 3 or 4 frigid touches, then probably you should play Prodigal Explorer. Next one is gonna be Lucian, and I think Lucian is sick. I know people kind of undervalue Assault in a lot of times, but I think the potential value of equipment getting just like +1 might kind of makes or breaks a fight. And I know it's gonna be harder to defend locations, but you're gonna be having a constant additional value out of the 1 piece of equipment because of cascading effect of the assault. Like if you have a unit that takes over a battlefield but then dies because your opponent attacked into it, but you had a unit in your base, suddenly the equipment that you use on the battlefield turn before now also has the value for the unit in the base, and that's additional +2 might over the course of 2 fights. I think Lucian is really good. The only problem is that you will need a lot of equipment for it to matter, right? So if your deck has only like 2 pieces of equipment, then I would probably not play Lucian. But if you open the Lucian pre-kit, it already has 4 pieces of equipment, and that alone I think makes Lucian playable. And I think it's an incredible effect if you start thinking about the actual fights that you're gonna do on the battlefields. So I've seen and I heard some people talk to me that you know, Lucian is not that great for sealed event. I disagree. Next legend I'm gonna rank is gonna be Irelia, and I'm putting her in A side, A tier, because the reason for that, her ability is not that powerful in the early game. It deramps you quite a lot if you use equipment for it, right? So you're gonna be like deramping by 2 runes if you play in equipment, use the equipment to attach to it, someone pay power for it, and then pay for the ready effect. So early game is gonna be pretty severely punishing for your mana curve, but at the same time it's gonna be an important aspect of you finishing the game. And a lot of decks and a lot of players who are not really like well versed in the Riftbound might have a problem with finishing games when they have, for example, have to conquer double battlefields at the end, right? And not by holding. So Irelia helps with that. The problem is that her pre-kit is really bad. It's like the worst out of the 6. So I would probably only play Irelia if I open her from a booster pack and I get another pre-kit that is like tied better into her identity. So then maybe like if I open like Prodigal Explorer, but I also have a Irelia, then maybe I'll play Irelia with the cards from that kit. So it's kind of interesting concept, but I don't think she's bad. I actually think she's pretty decent, but it's not as obvious as it is with, for example, Azir or Lucian, because they just get value immediately, right? You see the value real time, and maybe even in the early game, or should you see in the early game, or Irelia is going to be more towards the late game. Next one, we're going to take Ornn, and maybe I'm wrong about him as well as about Fiora. I feel like Ornn doesn't really deliver you a lot of value, because how big of a problem is going to be deramping for you when you use equipment. So it all depends on your deck. If you have a lot of very expensive units that your equipment will be a problem for when it comes to keeping up the curve to play them, then Ornn suddenly becomes much more attractive to your deck, right? Remember also, he will affect a third color of the equipment, so you will be able to do combos of equipment that you typically otherwise you would not be able to, like with Azir, right? The thing is though, it's still like not convincing me that it's gonna matter that much unless you're opening like really expensive bombs that are gonna be costing like 6, 7, 8 resources, for example, 6, 7, 8 energy, right? And in this case, then it becomes much more attractive for sure. Or if, for example, you open 2 Porous Naxes or 3 Porous Naxes in your deck, then you might actually consider playing an Ornn already. But that really depends on the deck construction, and because of this constraint, I'm putting him on C, but probably ahead of Fiora a little bit. So we're gonna do it this way. I'm not saying he's unplayable, but there's a very high chance he will not be chosen as a legend just because you're guaranteeing yourself a +1 card draw is probably better. Now let's talk about Jax, and I think Jax is like a pretty decent character. Again, it really revolves around the equipment that you have. But if you have the equipment, then this deck kind of works like a Fiora. Think about it this way: you don't deramp yourself, which is the goal of like having a Fiora if you play like an end game, right? Like expensive units at the end, and you also have the trick to actually detach your equipment and gear it up on other units, which will give you more value out of it. So I think Jax is pretty decent. I'm gonna put him ahead of Fiora because he has more impact over time, I think, in the early stages than Fiora, potentially, you know, because he also allows you to ramp up to the end game, while Fiora doesn't. It's the exact opposite. So I kind of like Jax in sealed. It really depends on what you open. If you have, for example, 2 brutalizers, that would be quite massive. But the problem with the brutalizers is that they are uncommons. So then, wait, are they uncommons? Yes, so they are uncommons. So getting 2 brutalizers is not gonna be easy. But overall, Jax is pretty decent, and I like him as an idea of a deck. So I wouldn't mind playing like any of those 5 here. I would not mind playing like Draven, Rexi, Lucian, Azir, Jax are, in my opinion, pretty decent options. And the last one that we have to talk about is Sivir. And I'm thinking I'm gonna put Sivir in the B tier. She's not great, she's not bad. I mean, you know what? Actually, maybe even C tier. Like, you essentially, what you want to achieve here is more flexibility in the colors that you play. So essentially, because in sealed you can play 3 colors, but you still have to pay the power cost in accordingly to the colors, Sivir allows you to play more expensive power cost cards in all 3 colors because you're gonna be able to use the gold more reliably. So that's one aspect of why Sivir could be decent in a sealed format, but at the same time, it just kind of ramps you up a little bit, right? Because once you start recycling your runes, actually no, it doesn't. That's what I'm talking about. It doesn't help you with ramping up. So yeah, I don't like her. I'll be honest with you, I don't like Sivir, so we're actually gonna put it at the end of the C. So yeah, I didn't think her through that much, so we're gonna put it at the end of the C, and I feel like this might be accurate. But if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. So what do you guys think about the tier list? Which legend do you think you would like to play in the event? Thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.